Sales activist and host of the Impact Sales podcast. Impact Sales Live was created to shine a spotlight on the best practices and tips that will help you stand out from the crowd in regard to sales. Whether you are an entrepreneur, a coach, a consultant, or a sales professional selling for a company, you're going to get a lot of value from Impact Sales Live. I'll be hosting Impact Sales Live every Monday here at 4 p.m. Eastern. So block off your calendar and make sure you start off your week the right way right here. Impact Sales Live today is sponsored by our premier sponsor, Podcast EZ. Podcast EZ is your go-to source for all things podcasting. You just speak and their team will take care of the rest. We used Podcast EZ to help us create and launch the Impact Sales podcast, and we are completely thrilled with the results. To learn more about Podcast EZ, just check out the link that I'm going to be dropping in the chat right now. Okay. So let's kick things off with a quick explanation about Impact Sales Live. You never know what might happen here, who will be on, what guests we have. So plan on seeing some guests coming up in future weeks, as well as some sales stories and sales successes. More importantly, we'll be making sure that you all get actionable, valuable insights and information that you can put into action for your own respective businesses. Whether you are an entrepreneur, a coach, or a consultant, you're going to get a lot of value here at Impact Sales Live. So keep your arms and legs inside the car at all times. Make sure your seatbelt is fastened, and away we go. So let's start talking a little bit about what the topic of today's live is all about, and that is overcoming objections. Now, I know when we talk about overcoming objections, there is a wide range of different things that you can address when you're talking about objections, various types of objections, various specific objections in categories. And we're going to briefly touch on some of those, but our focus today is going to be about objection handling in general and how you can position those objections the right way and truly move closer to the sale, move towards the close. So don't get caught up on specific individual objections. We're going to be talking more generally about objection handling on average, exactly how you can address it, how you can focus on it, and more importantly, how you can use it to your advantage in the sales process. So when I first got started in professional selling well over 30 years ago, one of the things that I spent quite a bit of time on was trying to understand the idea of how to best address objections. And one of my early mentors had told me that, don't get caught up so much in what is told to you. Make sure that you understand more specifically where the objection is coming from, what the source of the objection is, what really the issue may be. And don't get caught up in exactly what they say, because he said prospects many times will not be able to accurately describe all the things that might be holding them back. And they come up with a summary or one particular objection that might be the issue. And it may be a part of it. It may be the entire issue, but more than likely, there's a little bit more behind the scenes. So it's going to take a little bit of work on your part to kind of figure out exactly what that is. So I took all of that to heart. I became a good student, a student of success, and particularly in sales. And I really wanted to understand objections. And the thing that holds people back a lot of times with objections is not that they don't anticipate them coming and not that they don't expect them to come, but for whatever reason, it will unhinge or unnerve the sales professional, the coach, the consultant, the entrepreneur, whoever it is that's trying to work with the client and complete a transaction. It'll just unhinge the process. It'll knock them off track. It'll knock them off their rhythm, however you define it for yourself, whether it is your process, your program, your rhythm, your own little steps that you take in it. Many times objections really can knock you off that track, that rhythm. And that is the bigger issue. And what I mean is this: a lot of times it's not the objection that is the problem. And here's an example. Many times the prospect will share an objection and it's really more of a question or a concern, but not really an objection. It's more of a soft objection, not something that's going to make them say no, but it's really something that requires them to get clarification or more detail. They need clarity. They don't necessarily have truly an objection. They just require clarity. So the first thing that I have written down as it relates to objections is make sure that you understand exactly where the prospect is coming from, exactly what the issue is, what their concerns are, and truly listen to understand. Now, here's what happens with a lot of people. A lot of people will hear an objection, and whether it's out of excitement or whether it's out of a desire to want to work with the prospect, or maybe it's just you just know deep down that your product, your service, you're offering is going to have a major impact on them, and you're all geared up and wanting to talk about it. And sometimes that comes out sideways when talking to your prospects. Sometimes it can come off as defensiveness. Sometimes it can come off as you being maybe a little aggressive because you really want them to get that value that you know you can bring. Maybe it's just you want to solve a problem they have and you know you can solve it. You just know deep down that you have the solution, and they throw out a soft objection, and all of a sudden it truly just pushes them back because you come off as defensive. So the first thing that I want to share, and I think it's so important for everybody that's listening to this or catching the recording later, is number one, don't change the way you are because of the objections. Don't become defensive. Don't feel like you have to dramatically attack whatever it is that they're sharing with you as an objection. Be yourself. Don't lose focus on the bigger picture. Don't change your process. Don't change your rhythm. Don't do any of that. Now, the reason why I share that is at some point in the process, and it might be early in the sales process, it might be at the point where those objections come up. It's not uncommon at all for emotion to start to play a role in what's going on within this conversation. So keep your emotions in check, put them off to the side, tuck them down, stuff them down, whatever you've got to do, but get them under control. Don't react emotionally. Don't push back. Don't feel like you have to challenge the objection right away. Start with understanding exactly where it is. Don't just listen to hear, but listen to understand. Thank you, Claudia, for that comment. I think it's so important that you really try to understand where they're coming from. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking good clarifying questions at that point. If you're not really sure what the origin of a question is or an objection is coming from your prospect, it's very appropriate for you to ask them specifically, can I ask you specifically, what exactly are your concerns about that? Or what specifically is causing this concern or pause or request for additional clarification? Or what's the reason behind this? Because sometimes people really haven't even talked it through themselves. They just feel a gut reaction to what they may have seen or heard or have had proposed to them. So it's important that you truly understand what it is. One of the other notes that I made for myself, because this is so important, both in your individual communications, but just in general, as it relates to dealing with your prospects, your clients, and anybody out there in business, don't assume anything. Don't assume that the objection means they're not interested. Don't assume that the objection means that you're done, dead in the water, and you can't move any forward. But more importantly, don't assume that you know exactly what is going on until you get a really good clarification as to what the issue is. Many times people will jump to conclusions or make assumptions as to what objections may be, when really it is just that clarification, as I mentioned before. Or maybe it's they assume that because other people have given them one particular objection, that that objection may be hiding just beneath the surface with this current prospect. And sometimes I've seen this happen on actual sales calls where somebody will have an objection and the origin of the objection is entirely different than what the salesperson thinks it is. And the salesperson answers based upon an assumption they have. And I want to caution everybody that's listening to this to understand, not only do you really need to listen to understand what the issue is or may be that's causing the objection, but don't assume early in that process that you know exactly where it's coming from. It could be a variety of different things. Maybe it is a past experience that impacted them that you need to explore a little bit. Maybe it is a preconceived notion or perception that isn't accurate. Maybe it's just, as I said earlier, a misunderstanding of some things that require clarity. Most importantly, in the message here, what you should really underline, this is definitely one you want to write down, is don't assume anything with the objection. Um, I have seen it all professionally in selling. I've been a part of so many different interactions, both personally as well as a sales leader, a partner, an associate, being there as a part of these conversations. And I've seen it all. I've seen people literally fold up and collapse with that first objection, which I always find interesting. Like, you've gone through all that work and one objection knocks you off track. Or I've seen people make those wrong assumptions and go in the wrong direction when the objection really had nothing to do with that. But the big ones, the ones that you really need to master, number one, is listening to understand. Make sure you figure out the origin of the objection. Number two, don't assume anything as a result of that objection. You're still trying to find out all the things that are impacting them that might be creating the objection. Even when they tell you this is the reason, it may not be the entire reason. It may have additional contributing factors. There's a lot of things that you could explore. And the reason why that's so important in understanding going into it, one of the cardinal rules when it comes to objection handling that I think a lot of people miss is they cut off their prospect when their prospect perhaps was willing to share more with them about what their issue really is. For example, they may say, you know, I'm concerned that you can't deliver exactly the results that we're looking for. And as a result, I don't think we're quite ready to move forward. Now, that's a very general statement, like, I'm concerned you can't deliver. It doesn't give you any specific points that they're highlighting. You may be offering 10 things and you don't know which one of the 10 they're most concerned with. So it requires a lot of clarification. But many times people will jump right in and they'll have that defensive posture without maybe asking some follow-up questions and digging a little deeper. So don't cut your prospect off. That's another one you should write down. If your prospect is sharing with you additional details about their particular objection, don't cut them off. Let them share with you. If it seems like they're telling you more about what might be their concern, nurture that response from them. Ask them additional questions. Ask them to clarify. Ask them to repeat if you're not sure. Get them to tell you more, because many times your prospect, if you give them the opportunity to, will tell you everything that you need to know to be able to win their business and move forward. They'll tell you everything you need to know about overcoming the objection. They'll tell you everything you need to know about what the critical elements are to win their trust in their business. But that only happens if you create an environment where they're going to share things with you. I've seen people cut prospects off and make horrible assumptions about the actual objection itself. And as a result, they shortchange the sales process. Their prospect might have been objecting simply to see how you were going to respond. See, I've had clients say to me, we really had planned and want to work with you. We have some general concerns, but we were really trying to see how you handled the concern, because that will tell us a lot about what we can expect in other areas of your business. So don't assume anything when it relates to your prospects. It could be a literal objection. It could be a test of how you handle yourself. It could be a trying to get a sense better of your own communication skills and how they could assume to work with you going forward. So make sure that you approach the objection every bit the same way that you would approach your initial interactions with that prospect. You don't want to cut them off. You don't want to control the communication. And thank you, William, for your comment. Absolutely. Good communication is key. It's critical. You want there to be a free-flowing amount of information, whether you're talking about an objection or whether you're talking about the discovery phase of the appointment, it doesn't really make a difference. You want that communication to continue to flow. So don't ever cut your prospect off. Now, I will tell you, I could do multiple lives on just the skill set of continuing the conversation, nurturing a conversation, nurturing the objection and understanding it and mastering it. But let's break that down to its key elements. Okay. Let's get to what really matters most. Let's get right to the meat of it. If there's concern in your prospect, what they're really saying to you is, I'm not quite ready to make a decision. They're not saying no. They're really saying, I'm not quite ready. If it's a flat, hard no without objection, that's a no. That's something you have to deal with differently. But if the objection is, here is my concern, they're giving you a legitimate reason in their mind. Now, a lot of people might tell you to ignore what the prospect says, the whole concept that all buyers are liars. And, to a degree, there's some truth to that. But the more important thing that you need to understand about that, don't assume that any lying that occurs in the process of your prospect telling you why they can't work with you, whether it is a budgetary issue, whether it is a service related issue, you shouldn't assume they're lying any more than you should assume that you know everything about their objection without better communication. So, me personally, I'm not a big fan of the approach of just assuming that somebody is lying to you. If they're saying they can't afford it, they're lying to you. If they're saying that they are going to go with the competitor, they're lying. Like, I don't believe in that blanket statement. I do believe that it's true in one regard, that you shouldn't assume that they're one direction or another. I think you need to be open-minded that there's more information that needs to be collected. Your goal should be a master communicator in the sales process at every step of the process, whether it's at the beginning phase, the discovery phase, whether you're showing them a solution, whether you're dealing with objections, whether you're closing. You should want to master communication at all levels, in the process. And that comes with making sure you understand where the other person is coming from. A lot of times, sales professionals, coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs, whoever is selling a product or service or an offering, many times they'll make horrible assumptions about thinking they know where that person is coming from. And really, maybe the issue is not a major issue to overcome, but they wanted to kind of put you through your paces a little bit to see how you handle it. So, not only will you not assume, you shouldn't cut your prospects off. Don't stop them from telling you anything. If you don't feel you really have a very good working understanding of truly what the objection is, then it's your responsibility to do right by the client by saying, I want to make sure I understand your concerns completely. Is there anything else about that you haven't shared so far that you could perhaps clarify for me? I want to make sure that I do the very best I can in answering this. Is there a piece of this that you haven't shared or perhaps you want to expand on? And continue to nurture the communication, continue to nurture the interaction. The better you are at that, the better you are at asking questions, impact focused questions that get your prospect talking more, the more likely you are to overcome it. Now, the reason why that's so powerful is you get to be able to understand more than you probably ever did this far into the sales process, because now it's real for everybody. Now they heard what you have. You've heard everything that they have going on. You made a suggestion, a proposal, some type of offer to them, and you're literally waiting for a decision. And now is when it's crunch time. It's time that people need to figure out where they really are. Are we moving forward? Are we not? Are we moving backward? What's the status? So this is really important. So the reason why you don't want to assume and you don't want to cut somebody off is because you need every little bit of intelligence that you can get on the process, every single bit. If they offer up one little thing that could be important for you, what you understand about that sales process, it could be the missing piece, the missing link, the one final piece of the puzzle to make this transaction go. So you have to make sure that you ask. along those lines. If you don't, it is probably something that you don't uncover. And as a result, you can't overcome. If you don't know what it is, if you don't have clarity, you can't hit the target and solve the problem. You have to diagnose it correctly. Now, another thing that I think is really, really important when you're talking to people about objections, and this is so important. And ironically, very few people do this, but the elite sales professional will do this, at the right time, appropriately. And this comes back to something that might seem a little counterintuitive. I know when I've trained people and have coached people on this, they've told me that it felt a little weird doing this, but it's so powerful. Is when the objection is given, and when you feel like you've gotten a lot of the detail that you need to handle the objection before you start answering it, before you get into, line after line after line of addressing the concern, the worry, the issue itself, before you ever get to any of that, there's something so critically important that you have to do to set up your success. But so few people do it. And I'm going to tell you what that is right now. And it's this: you have to thank them for the objection. You have to stop where you are. And before you go into how you handle the objection, and again, you're fact finding, you're finding details, you haven't assumed anything, you haven't cut them off, you're nurturing the conversation, you're getting some of the details from them. Before you get into addressing it and positioning, you have to do that critical thing. You have to thank them for it. Now, here's why, and here's the power behind that. There are certain words in the English language that create a much more positive feeling in any interaction. They can create a positive feeling. They can create a nurturing feeling, depending upon the word. They can come alongside somebody. You could use the word help, and naturally people know that somebody's helping somebody. There's this coming alongside visualization that happens. But when you thank somebody, and not thank somebody to do it just because you have to check the box and do it, but truly thank them because it's meaningful and you appreciate it. When you come at them with truly that correct attitude of gratitude that they've given you objection, you thank them for it. It's a powerful shift in the dynamic of that interaction. Powerful. Because now you thank them for sharing that information, sharing that objection, telling you they've done something that many times a lot of people don't even do. How many times do people just not tell you? They just say no, or they just ignore you, or hey, heaven forbid, nowadays they ghost you. You make a proposal, you schedule an appointment to go over it, and they ghost you, right? So now more than ever before, you need to thank people. Thank them for telling you what the objection is. Don't hold back. Be serious about it and tell them, look, I really appreciate you sharing this with me. And because many times people don't tell me. I'm so appreciative of you telling me, because now I feel like we've uncovered every possible thing. And that way I know that I've done the very best that I can do for you. If I don't know what the objection is, I will always wonder, what was it? And you may wonder as well. So now together we can figure out, do we move forward together or not? And that only happened because you told me about it, and I appreciate it. And I will tell you that many of the most successful salespeople that I've ever been associated with and worked with have been the people that were so genuinely sincere at every stage of the sales process, including handling objections, that people wanted to work with them. They just wanted to, because man, that's just a great guy. I want to work with that guy. I want to figure out a way of taking care of that guy, that person. Maybe even not today, but down the road. Maybe it's in the form of a referral. I want to work with them because every interaction was pleasant. See, remember, when you're talking about objections, when there's pushback, there's that, I've used this visualization before in these lives. There's that wall, that wall of tension that's between you and the prospect. And they put the wall up in the form of an objection. They put it right up here to stop you. And when you say thank you and truly mean it and express that to them, that wall comes down a little bit. The tension is removed from it. Okay. The whole interaction dynamic is different. And that's so powerful for you when it comes to positioning the next part of the communication, which is addressing the concerns, addressing the objection, figuring out how you truly take the next step with them. Now you have clarity. They're giving you the clarity because they want to know how you're going to come back with an answer. They want to know what you're going to say. So you start with thanking them. Powerful stuff. If you feel uncomfortable at that point of the process, saying thank you, I will tell you deep down, you haven't earned the right to win their business. Because for you to be sincere at that point, to go through that entire process and have them say, hey, I have a problem, and you not sincere about hearing about it and miss the opportunity to thank them, you probably have not set yourself up as well as you could. I'm not saying people wouldn't work with you. I'm just saying that you probably could have done a lot of a better job in positioning it. It's also a building block of a better relationship with them. Some of the best clients that I've ever had, thousands and thousands of clients in multiple industries across the board, started with objections. They started with sometimes some significant objections, challenging objections, things that I didn't think we would overcome, but we worked on them together. Ironically, and maybe some of you have had this experience as well, ironically, they became my best clients. They became the ones that, they stuck with me the longest. They worked with me the longest. There's a better appreciation for each other because we felt like we worked on something together in addition to the core business by overcoming the objection, digging through it. And I know it may have been a minor thing in some cases, but I can't tell you how many times, countless amounts of times, and some of you have experienced this, where somebody says, thank you so much for explaining that to me because I didn't understand it. But then when I brought it up to you, you explained it to me more thoroughly. And now I understand. So, we're going to go grade school on the please and thank yous, the common etiquette that you should have, but they're powerful in the sales environment. Please tell me what is going on, what the issue is, what the objection is. Thank you for sharing it with me. I appreciate that. Please and thank you. They're still the magic words, right? But somehow along the way, we forget that. We forget that in the sales process. We forget that in how we interact with people. And I think it's becoming in some regards a little bit of a lost art. But it shouldn't be. It should be something that you stick with. That's where that relationship building block is formed. The professional courtesies, right? But back on point to objection handling, it's so powerful now because everything that was a tense situation has now become a lot easier to deal with because you positioned it differently. What was a tense in your face objection, right, now has become, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Please allow me the opportunity to get into this with you. Now, there's a way you do about that. There's a way you go about doing it that's extremely powerful. And it comes from another two simple words falling under the etiquette category that make all the difference in the world. And that is, the powerful words of saying, I'm sorry. And I'll tell you exactly how you use that. When somebody has said to you, here's my objection, and you thank them for giving it to you, the very next thing that you should say is, I'm sorry. Perhaps I didn't do a good enough job of describing that to you. If you will allow me, I'd like to explain this in a little bit more detail because I think I didn't do a good enough job when I first covered it. And see, it's really hard for people to feel negative when somebody is being sincere enough to say, I'm sorry, thanking them, and then trying to show them something that will address their concern. Most people will give you the benefit of the doubt and give you the opportunity to handle that. I think two of the most disarming words in the English language when used together are I'm sorry, right? And in this way, it's not a a manipulation, but it truly is a path towards making them recognize that you want to work with them, deal with the objection, overcome it, and most importantly, come to a satisfactory conclusion. And you'll say something like, I'm so sorry that I don't think I did a good enough job of describing this. Now, if the objection is completely offline of the things that you may have shared already, then that's why the clarification is so critical. That's why it's so powerful and important for you to dig into what's going on with those prospects and really uncover what's happening with them. Because when you get those clarity questions out of the way, when you really understand the objection, now you have a path to take. You thank them. You say, "I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job of asking that clarifying question of you at the beginning phase. But now that I know that this is a concern, will you allow me the opportunity to kind of show you how we can address that or how we can overcome that?" Now, part of the reason that I think that's so powerful is not only does it relieve a lot of the tension of the objection, right? It takes a lot of the tension out. It literally programs your own mind to address the issue the right way. And give me 1 second. What it does for you as a prospect or as dealing with the prospect is it gives you the opportunity to completely eliminate the defensiveness that can naturally seep in. And maybe defensiveness isn't the best word, but maybe it's anxiousness, excitement. Sometimes it's defensiveness, but most of the time it's just because you know that you could probably help the prospect and probably have a great solution to do that. And you just want to make it happen for them. So let's just call it under that same umbrella, whether it's anticipation, anxiousness, defensiveness, whatever it is, saying things in the order that I'm giving you, by truly making it a more stress-free interaction avoids any of that. It avoids you flying off the handle. It avoids you jumping back at them about something that they said as far as an objection, because it puts you down a path to naturally just flow through the conversation in a way that's going to be much better for them and much better for you, and ultimately get you a better result because you're now enhancing the degree of communication with that prospect. The tension isn't there. There's no tension between the two of you the same way. It's a much more low-key interaction. Okay. One of the other things that's so critical, and that's why these things are really, really important, is there are some extremely powerful positioning steps that come up next for you to be able to position your prospect for close. And it's so important in your success that you need to set the table the right way for that. And before I get into the positioning aspects, I just once again just want to thank our premier sponsor, Podcast Easy, your go-to source for all things podcasting. If you haven't yet checked out the Impact Sales podcast, go to any platform that you get your podcasts on, whether it's Apple, Google, Spotify, whichever one it is. Pick a platform. We're on 38 different platforms placed there by Podcast Easy. Just look up the Impact Sales podcast. You'll see my face on the promo spot. Jump on, grab a couple of episodes, and see exactly what Podcast Easy is all about. They helped me create a podcast specifically what I wanted to do by sharing best practices of top sales producers, top sales thought leaders, and really game changers in professional selling. So check out a podcast, and more importantly, check out Podcast Easy. If you've ever wanted to have a podcast, and you just didn't know where to start, or you were overwhelmed by the technology, I was that guy. I was absolutely that guy. Click on the link that you see in the chat. You can see all about Podcast Easy. You can get connected to their team, and they could definitely help set you up. If you have any questions about them, reach out to me. I'm happy to tell you about my own experience. You can check out my podcast, see some of their handiwork and exactly what it is that they can do for you. But don't miss the opportunity. It's really something special. So back to positioning the objection for a close. No matter what the objection is, the steps are the same, right? You're not going to assume anything. You're not going to cut off the prospect. You're going to hear specifically what the issue is, and you're going to draw out as much as you can because they'll share things with you. And then at that pivotal moment, you're going to pivot and you're going to thank them for the objection. Whoa, mind blowing, right? We're going to thank somebody for an objection. Who would have thought that you ever would do that? That's exactly why you do it. That's exactly why you do it. You know why? Because that's the point when people think the tension is going to be at its highest. That's when they think the person that's showing them something is going to be more defensive, more aggressive. They're expecting it. They're thinking that's when it's going to be, right? And the easiest way to make it go away is to just thank them. Because you know what? You should thank them. They're telling you what you need to know. They're moving you closer to hopefully a successful transaction. And none of that is possible without them sharing. They could have just as easily fallen into the camp of those people that either ghost you or just say, no, not for me, and don't give you anything, right? So you should thank them. And after you thank them, you're going to follow up with those powerful words. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that this is, the objection. Perhaps I didn't do, it's not you, it's me, right? You're going to say, I'm sorry. I probably didn't do a good enough job of describing this, or I'm sorry. Maybe I should have explained to you in more detail. This is how this addresses that, especially when you know that those issues are addressed in your offering. It's powerful to do that. But how do you position things for the close at this point? Well, I'm going to tell you the critical steps, the steps of how to do it the right way, how to get yourself set up for a successful close after you overcome the objection. The first thing you have to do after following the steps I've already given you, after thanking them and saying them sorry, is the first thing you need to do is you have to make the very best effort at isolating the objection. And here's what I mean by that. You want to isolate the objection. You want to get it pushed off to the side, isolate it, and have or encourage the prospect to identify that as the only reason that they're not ready to move forward. You want to isolate it, push it off to the side. And the reason is once it's isolated and you can go and deal with it, you should have a clear playing field towards moving forward. And you want to get that prospect to agree and gain some agreement that if I'm able to get this addressed for you in a way that's completely satisfactory to you, not, me just saying it, but truly satisfies you, if I'm able to overcome that objection, is there any other reason here that you wouldn't be comfortable working with me or working with us or moving forward, however you phrase it? Okay. So you isolate and then ask. You isolate because you want to get them to push that off to the side to say, I get it. Yes, if you deal with this and I'm happy with the way you deal with it, that's the only reason. The reason why you want to isolate and ask them, is there any other reason? Is it's a trial close. It's if I do this, it's not it's not a yes or a no. It's a if. If I do this, will you be comfortable moving forward? It's a trial close. It also tells you if there's some other reason that they may not be able to move forward. Okay. It's not uncommon for people to throw one objection out, knowing they have another one that is sitting there. And maybe you haven't uncovered that yet. Maybe you haven't uncovered what that additional objection is. And because of that, you literally are missing a piece of what you need to know. So isolate first and ask them, if we are able to address that completely to your satisfaction, if we're able to make you comfortable with this or overcome this, or however you phrase it, if we're able to take care of this in a way that makes you happy, completely you, if it makes you happy, is there any other reason that we can't move forward? And wait for their answer. Don't assume it. Wait for their answer. If they say, no, that would be it, that's the only thing, you now know you have positioned yourself in the best possible way to be able to move forward once you address that objection, once you get that out of the way. Okay. Now it's powerful that you do it at the right time. You have to do it before you truly address that question, that objection. You have to make sure that you isolate and get them to commit that as long as you address this issue to their satisfaction, that they'll be willing to move forward. Because if you do it after, you don't know what you may have created. You may have extended the conversation in a way you didn't need to. You want to make sure that you do it at the beginning. And then you want to address the objection. You want to dig into the reasons that are holding them back and figure out how to overcome it. And that could be a variety of different issues. It could be cost, it could be service level, it could be confidence, it could be their trust in you, it could be past history. Insert issue here. It could be any possible thing. But the process itself, the way you overcome them, is pretty much the same. The actual step that you share something with them that overcomes a particular objection may be different. Like your rebuttal may be different. The steps in the rebuttal may be different, but how you address the objection and how you position the objection, that's the same no matter which they are. And I would encourage you to follow the same process, because it becomes a lot easier for you personally to stay on point, stay on schedule, stay on your rhythm of your sales process by following the same type methodology each time. Not that you can't adjust it, you certainly can. But what happens is you tend to find that when people adjust their process a little bit too much, they lose focus and they lose momentum. If you're able to keep your process concise and relatively the same each time out, even with the objections, if you kind of follow the same steps, it's much more likely that you'll stay on point and that you'll be successful. So how do you position whatever your rebuttal is and whatever your work through solution is? It's positioned the same way. Okay. You want to make sure that you position it in a way that says, now you said, if I'm able to address these things to your satisfaction, there isn't any other reason that we can't move forward. Is that correct? Yes. Well, let's dig into these together. And you dig into them a little bit. And at the end of all of that, after you address their concern, if you get them comfortable with it, you have to gain an affirmation, an agreement that you've done it. You need to go back to them and say, when you first brought this up, you mentioned that the pricing was a concern. Now, would you agree, based upon our current conversation here, that we've come to a compromise that would work for you financially? Would you agree that this could work for you and your organization? Yes, they agree with it. Well, that's great. So based upon what you said earlier, this was the only issue that was holding you back. Let me explain next steps and just move right into what the next step may be, whether it's an agreement, a letter of intent, a contract, whatever that might be. Don't even give them the opportunity to think about it, because you've already asked them and they gave you the commitment that if you addressed it to their satisfaction, which you just validated, that they'd be ready to move forward, that would be it. And I know some people would think, wow, that's a lot all at once. It really isn't. If you've gone through all those steps, if you've had the interaction, if you've communicated with them, if you've done all of that through the process, it really isn't that big of a leap to say, now that I've addressed this for you and you've agreed that this meets your needs financially as well as it, and you had shared that that was the only thing holding us back, let me explain how we can get started. And many times people will jump right in and say, okay, let's go. Let's get started. Let's do it. Sometimes people do such a good job in how they handle the objection, and they don't do a great job of positioning the next step. And it's a little awkward pause. And maybe this has happened to some of you, and it's happened to me many times over the years. Maybe there's this little awkward pause where you kind of don't know, should I ask for the business now, or should we do something else? Should we revisit stuff? Sometimes the client, the prospect, just goes, so what's next? What do we do to get started? Like, they just throw it right at you. Like, here I am. Yeah, let's go. That's one option, right? That's one thing that can happen. Another option might be that despite your best efforts, maybe there is another objection that you didn't uncover. And maybe they didn't really catch what you were saying when you said about, is there any other reason? Maybe they didn't think about it, or maybe another one came up. You may have to start the process over again. But guess what? The process sounds the same. Isolate. So let me understand what you're saying is, here's the concern, here's the issue, here's the objection. If I'm able to address this completely to your satisfaction, and you agree that I do that, is there any other reason that we can't move forward? No, that would be it. Great. Well, let me show you exactly how we can deal with this. Then you work on it via rebuttal, come back, whatever it is that you would show to overcome that objection, and you kind of work on it, starting the cycle of the objection again, but not going all the way back and starting the whole process. You're okay, a new one popped up. Let's attack it the same way. Let's isolate it and then follow up. It's a powerful process. Now, the other thing that may come up is timing. They may say, yeah, but I'm not quite ready. Okay, well, let's clarify what that means. Is it you're not ready today? You're not ready tomorrow? Like, you do need to understand what that is. So again, asking clarifying questions. Oh, I understand completely. What time did you have in mind? What did you have in mind as far as the timeline? Now, I know some people may say, well, that's not what a lot of people say. They say you want to specifically direct the timetable, and that might be true. What I will tell you is your greater success is typically probably going to come when you allow them to start with an initial timeline for starting, and then you creatively perhaps accelerate that by explaining the process to them. Like, maybe there's a large internal timetable that it takes you to get things going with whatever you're offering, time to prepare, time to build something, whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with getting them to start with the timetable first. And the reason is you now have a better sense of what they're thinking, where they are. Well, yeah, I definitely would want to do this, but I'm not quite ready yet. You got to remember, none of these things matter unless they have the ability to work with you, the budget to work with you, and the timetable lines up. There's a specific timetable for all of this. So make sure that you check down those things as you're working through it in the process. But you want to make sure, and this is another thing that you should write down, and it doesn't matter whether it's initial objections or whether it's follow-up objections or whether it's something that comes up in the midst of all of this. Your goal, after isolating the objection and getting them to agree that if you address it correctly in a way that satisfies them, that they would move forward, your goal of doing all of that is to really come back to one thing, and that's setting clear expectations, right? That's really what it is. It's about setting clear and specific expectations and doing it in multiple steps. Like, okay, I'm going to be very clear. You've expressed that this is a concern for you. If I'm able to show you how we can address that concern, very clear, if I'm able to show you how we can address it, make you happy, satisfy you, how you phrase it. If I'm able to do that, is that the only reason you can't work with me? You're going to set the clear expectation that I've done this and now you'll do that. You'll move forward, right? When it comes to moving forward, setting the expectation works both ways. Sharing something like, nothing is going to move forward unless you are completely satisfied. If you're completely happy with what I'm showing you, the answers that it's going to bring, the solutions that it's going to provide for you, and more importantly, the impact it's going to have. None of that matters unless you're completely satisfied. And that's the expectation that I'm setting. The bar is your satisfaction. That's the level that we're trying to get to. And when you set that there for them and you meet it, there's not a lot of objections left if you've truly encouraged them to share anything they have. They're just there's no reasoning behind it. Sometimes it's just a matter of you needing to say, I've done my part. I've done what I said that I was going to do. I've addressed your objection. I've shown you how we would work through it. You've agreed that it's met your satisfaction and you're comfortable with it. And you had said when I started to ask this question that if we were able to do that, that you'd be comfortable moving forward. Here's how we get started, and just move right into it. Now, like with anything, the steps are not complicated, but there's little nuances to them. There's little steps that can play a role or impact your success. One of them is confidence. One of them is how you say it. It's not what you say sometimes, it's how you say it. So I want to encourage you that it's not just jotting down the notes and reading off a cue card specifically what you should say. that makes the difference. Sometimes it's less about the wording being perfect and more about the confidence you exude and the strength of belief that the prospect has that you can deliver on what you're showing them. Many times I've had many clients, probably hundreds of clients that have said to me, I worked with you or your company because I believed in you more. I believed in you more because I believed you were sincere. I believed the company more so in their offerings. I believed in you more, right? That's a confidence thing. Had little to do with the specifics of what I said. It was more so how it was said or how the company portrayed it. And that's very much the same for you in any sales interaction. So, communication is king in all of this. The stronger communication skills that you're able to develop, the less important it is that all of the details are perfect. The less important it is that what you say is to the letter exact. It doesn't matter what those details are. And I share this because it's very, very true. If people buy the concept that you're going to impact them in a positive way, deliver a product, a service, or an offering that's going to change their world and give them a lot of value and impact them, if they buy that, the details are less important. And as it relates to objections, it's extremely critical because you need to look at every single objection that might be thrown your way as an opportunity for you to exude confidence, an opportunity for you to share exactly why they should work with you. Your responses should be with that in mind. And that's why not being defensive is so important. Not cutting them off is so important. There's a quiet confidence to that. There's a quiet, relaxed professional confidence to not rushing the process, not pushing them, not getting confrontational. You exude confidence when you do that. Even if you may not feel or be confident, if you can act confident, your personal internal confidence will catch up. And I'm not at all saying act as if. You still got to deliver. You still have to be the real deal. You still have to be great at what you do. I'm not diminishing that. What I'm saying is don't allow lack of confidence to be a reason why somebody doesn't look close enough at you. And objections are one of those categories that peels back the veil and allows people an opportunity to truly see what you're all about. If your response to objections is tense or stressful or pushy or whatever it is, however you respond, whatever your personal response tactic is, if it's any of those things and it's not confident and it doesn't give people a good vibe about you, well, that's going to tell them everything they need to know about wanting to work with you. And remember, the whole basis for this is people want to work with people that they know, like, and trust, that they have a lot of respect for, that they believe in. And nothing will do that more and exude that more in their eyes than you being confident in the way you handle it. Objections don't rattle you. They roll right off because you have a great offering. You just need to work through some things with them. And maybe at the end of all of this, and this is one of those eventualities that happens well, maybe at the end of all of this, sometimes your solution isn't the best fit. Maybe it isn't. And maybe it means that you need to say to them, look, I know that we're not going to be able to address all of your concerns. But let me ask you, if we could address 80% of your concerns and get you that much closer to where you want to go, would that be important to you? Well, of course it would. Would that be valuable? Yeah. Would that have an impact? Sure. Maybe you don't have to have everything perfect. Take the pressure off, take those bricks off your back that you have to be perfect in everything that you do. Just be sincere about it. Sometimes, in a rare occasion, you might get to that point and you may say, I don't think we have the best solution for you. Now, I would encourage you to get there sooner rather than later. If you don't think you can address their need, their concern, their problem inside their business by your product or your service, I suggest you get there earlier. But sometimes you get to that place and their issues are hung up on things that really aren't in your wheelhouse. They're not to one of your strengths. And sometimes you have to say, look, I believe that maybe it's not the best fit. And my personal commitment to everybody I work with is always that if I'm not the best fit, I'll help you find the right one, or I'll point you in the right direction, or I'll tell you, at least tell you I'm not the right fit. And that takes a lot of pressure off of the interaction. It also maintains your reputation and keeps people good at what you're all about. So as you think about objections, as you think about positioning, as you think about how you approach not only handling the objections or what I've shared so far, remember the importance of those individual items. Make sure that you truly listen to understand. When people start telling you things, don't just hear it, understand it. And if you don't understand it, shame on you if you don't a clarifying question. Ask the question so you truly understand it. Don't assume anything from your prospect. Don't assume good or bad. Don't assume that something is a big problem when it's not, or vice versa. Make no assumptions. Get to the bottom of it. Make sure you understand everything. Don't assume one objection is really what it is, and it might be something else, and they haven't gotten comfortable enough to tell you yet. Make sure you don't cut them off. And I said it over and over again. Your prospect, if you ask the right questions, will tell you everything that you need to know about what it would take to win their business. But you have to ask the right questions. You have to be personable. You have to communicate well, and you have to ask the right questions. If you questions, they may never tell you. It's rare that they just dump it all on you and say, here it all is. Here's everything you need to know. Help me, right? Usually you have to pull some of it out. And even when you think they have, there's usually something they haven't shared. So whatever you do, don't cut them off. Make sure that they share all the details about the objection, the issue, so you can truly overcome it. You want to isolate the objection, put it off to the side, and ask them specifically, is that the only reason? Isolate the only reason. This over here, is this the only reason that you aren't ready to move forward? And gain their agreement. And that's a very important point. That's going to tell you if that really is the issue or if it isn't. Is there something else? If you ask them a direct question, is that the only reason? And they say yes, you now have them on that path. And if you can address that, you now can move forward. You want to thank them. Again, I know it might make some of you uncomfortable. Thank them for the objection. Say, look, I'm so appreciative of you telling me that this is your concern, because now I feel that I've done everything I possibly can do to show you how we can help. And now I know this is a concern, so I can show and walk you through it. I'm sorry, which is the next part. I'm sorry if I didn't do a good enough job explaining this, reviewing this with you, explaining the impact, talking about the value, whatever it is. Apologize for not giving them what they need, and make sure that they understand that nothing is going to move forward at all unless you completely satisfy them. And if you do, there shouldn't be anything else that's holding them back. And when you have addressed every single issue and you've gotten them back to that place and you've addressed the concerns and they're satisfied, the automatic assumption is to jump right in and say, let's get you started. Here's what we do next. And if something else comes up, the process starts over again. Isolate and figure out specifically what the issue is, dig through it, go through all the same steps, and make sure you work back to that same place of breaking through that. I hope this information has been valuable for you and will have a positive impact on your success. I know if you deploy it, if you use this stuff, go back and watch the video again, watch the recording of this. I guarantee you, if you follow these steps and do this when you're dealing with objections, you'll not only handle your objections more effectively, you'll position more sales for a positive outcome. Make sure you catch the Impact Sales Podcast wherever you catch your podcast. It is filled with information just like what you saw in today's Impact Sales Live. Catch next week's Impact Sales Live, same time, same place, 4 p.m. Eastern every Monday. Put it in your calendar. Get this information. Catch me on the Impact Sales Podcast. If I can help you in any way, you can also text the word sales to the number 321-421-5213. That's sales to 321-421-5213. You can jump on my calendar We'll have a strategy session to talk about what's going on with sales in your business, and I'll do whatever I can to help. I once again want to thank our premier sponsor, Podcast EZ, for all of their help and support with the Impact Sales Podcast and Impact Sales Live. And if you ever wanted to get involved with having your own podcast, I tell you, check them out. I put the link in the chat. Make sure you grab it, jump on there, get to know their team. I promise you, it'll be a game changer for you and your success. This is Joe Beck with the Sales Activist and Impact Sales Live. Look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.